Hello and welcome to Levels of Life. My name is Brandon Giles and I'm really grateful that you're here today. My purpose for this podcast is to create a community that want to become the best versions of themselves. A community that want to strive to reach their potential and essentially level up in all aspects of our health, wealth, love and happiness. I want to do this by introducing you to successful people and ideas from all industries and walks of life. Success always leaves clues, and I want to unlock those clues so we together can learn from their experiences and advice to help us excel and achieve our goals. I firmly believe, myself included, that we are capable of a lot more than we think we are. And by using this podcast, I want people to come along this path with me to watch and help each other achieve monumental success and fulfillment in our lives. Now, today's guest is Dr. Craig Hassed. He is a successful author, having published 10 books around the topic of mindfulness and meditation. I'm excited to have him on as we talk about all things mindfulness and how being mindful and practicing meditation can immensely help our mental fortitude. We touch on all the health benefits that are associated with practicing mindfulness, as well as how you can adopt meditation and mindfulness into your daily lives. I hope you enjoy the show, and if you really liked it, I would love for you all to send it to a friend. Give it a like or leave a review. So let's jump into it. Welcome, Craig, to the first podcast of Levels of Life with Brandon Giles. Now, this is a podcast I've started to try and help be the best versions of ourselves in all aspects of health, wealth, love and happiness. And I'm ecstatic to have you on.
Very happy to be with you, Brandon.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll give listeners just a quick background of you, and it's quite amazing. You're author of 13 books, and you're a Monash Senior Lecturer at the Department of General Practice. You've been teaching there since 1989, so for a long time. And you're pretty much Australia's leading expert on mindfulness and how to practice it. So welcome to the show.
Good to be with you. I think there are a few other pretty savvy people about mindfulness in Australia these days, and indeed all around the world. So it's good to see so much interest in it.
Yeah, it is good. And there's a few funny things we'll talk about today, but just how we met was funny. We were over in Wellington last year on a special day where we were in a little pub watching the Richmond Grand Final. And it was a good moment, and just you sparked my curiosity when we just got to talking, and you were there for was it a lecture on mindfulness?
Yeah, it was a conference, speaking at a conference, and I accepted the invitation very early in the year, but I kind of knew it was grand final weekend, and Richmond, they're going to be pretty competitive, and I thought, should I really accept an invitation to speak overseas on grand final weekend? But I did. So straight from the airport, dropped the bags at the hotel, straight to that bar, and I had to find out which bar in Wellington actually showed the grand final live. There was only a
couple. We were running late because we were like, I can't find this bar. There's only one or two, and then we got there. I think it was quarter time or something, and then just the show went on. So it was good. It was good. Yeah. So it's been an incredible journey so far in terms of coronavirus and COVID-19, and it's really, for me, when we first messaging, what I wanted to talk about was your book, Mindfulness for Life, that you recommended, which was a great book on opening my awareness on what mindfulness is and how to meditate and what the benefits are. And really, after reading it, it was just astounding how simply doing something for free, not having to do anything and just sitting there, can really change your life and be a benefit. And just the stigmas of meditation, before I read this and before I spoke to you about what it is, and I just got it all wrong. I thought, you sit there in a chair and you try and block out all your thoughts and try and have a clear mind, and it's really learning just to pay attention and letting all the thoughts be there and just experience it.
Many people find that practicing meditation very difficult because there is an assumption I'm meant to be able to block out all my thoughts. I've got to have this kind of attention that's absolutely laser-like, and you sit down to practice and you realise the mind's all over the shop. Stuff's coming into your head whether you want it to or not. Mind wanders off. You're in a dream world most of the time. And people interpret that as not getting it right and then start beating themselves up over it when it's actually the process working. And what I mean by that is that the person's generally becoming aware of what they were not noticing previously. That is how distractible the mind is. And as we cultivate that awareness, we start to notice, not just when we're sitting in the chair practicing meditation, but in our day-to-day life, how much of the time we're not paying attention to what we're doing. We're not listening to the person speaking. We're not tasting the food that we're eating. We're not paying attention to the road when we're driving the car. And also our attention's going off at work, so not paying attention to the job we're trying to do. And so when people actually realise that awareness starts to offer them the choice about what to engage the attention with and what to leave alone, that's a really, really important choice to be able to make. And one of the important areas I'm sure you've noticed yourself, and certainly in my own experience, is that so many of the incessant patterns of thought, repetitive patterns of thought, are all to do with negativity, stress, worry, rumination. And that's why there's so much of that stuff, in poor mental health.
Yeah.
And the mindfulness helps a person not to get caught into those kinds of ruts. So it's got a lot of mental health benefits.
Yeah, we will be getting onto that. But I just it was interesting how you started. Now, I saw that when I looked you up, it was a swimming event that triggered you. You were nervous about it. And it was similar to today for my first podcast in the morning. Like, I wrote just some notes and some dot points, and I was starting to feel a bit nervous. And I'm thinking, this is going to happen later on today, not right now. So just focus on what you've got to do right now to actually help you for when it comes. And that's sort of how you thought about it when you started.
Yeah, I was in my, I think I was probably about 15 at the time, and I used to do a lot of competitive swimming, club, school, and in the lead up to big swimming meets, I'd often get quite nervous in the weeks leading up. Yeah, and I had this it was a Saturday morning, and I was going to be heading off from home, off to play a tennis match, soon, but I was sitting at home, and I started to feel a bit more, a bit queasy in the stomach and a bit nervous, and it's only a couple of weeks away now. And all of a sudden I had a moment of awareness. Wait a sec, I'm sitting in a comfortable chair in my own lounge room and I got these, beautiful lemon-scented gum tree full of wattle birds singing outside. All of a sudden I had a reality check and realised I've been in a dream world. And I noticed what was happening when I was stressed and anxious was the mind had projected an imaginary me in this imaginary future. And how's it going to go? Will it go well? Will it go badly, etc.? And all of a sudden I realised I'd been in a dream world and I didn't even realise it. Because as soon as I came back to present moment reality, the whole stress response just switched itself off. I thought, that's interesting. So for me, that kind of moment of awareness taught me a lot about stress, a lot about the mind, a lot about the cost of being unaware. And that sort of thing, that sort of experience sowed a seed for me when I went on and studied medicine, got interested in health and mental health in particular. It was like a mindful moment. I didn't have the language for it then, but it was a moment of awareness that really, and they were like little signposts for me in my future life and career.
It was like a sort of catalyst moment that put you onto this path, because it's incredible. Like at 15 and at that time, mindfulness and meditation isn't as popular as it was now. And for you to think of that at that time and then put you onto the path, it was quite incredible. Was it in your family that you were particularly mindful or anything like that growing up, or was it just a standard, you just thought of it then? Or I was curious to see how you got brought up to get to this.
Yeah, no, look, I can't say from my family upbringing that there was an interest in this kind of thing particularly. I think we weren't as distracted in previous generations as we are now, with the misuse of technology and so on. But no, it was kind of a spontaneous thing. It really tweaked my interest in the mind-body relationship, because I noticed the effects on my body of being lost in that world of worry and anxiety about a future that hadn't even happened.
Yeah.
And so that mind-body relationship, I just knew that did not feel right, that did not feel good. Now, mind you, I didn't have 1,000 randomized controlled trials to tell me that. It was just as obvious.
It was just obvious. Yeah.
Just spend a moment looking at your own mind and body, and you realise that a lot of what we give attention to up here has terrible effects on the body. And now, subsequently, There's so much research to show not only stress on the body and the cardiovascular system, but also reduce our immunity. It ages the brain faster. It even ages us fast down to the DNA of our cells. Telomeres, which I won't go into the details of it, but we actually age fast down to the DNA of our cells when we're not in a mindful state, which is off with worry and rumination, etc.
Yeah, I read up that Elizabeth Blackburn, 2009 Nobel Prize winner, she discovered that, and how I saw it was a funny stat. Middle-aged women that have, if they've got an optimistic mindset compared to a pessimistic mindset, they're actually, with pessimism, they're actually aging their DNA faster. And I was like, that's just incredible, just with how you...
You're about a decade older by middle age for those who have a disposition towards pessimism compared to optimism. And if you consider what happens when we're in a pessimistic mode of mind, it's almost constant rumination, negative self-talk, what about this, what about that? Whereas people with a more optimistic state of mind actually pay attention and engage more in the moment and responding to things. And you see, challenging life events are not seen in a very negative way. Challenging life events are seen as opportunities to learn and to grow and so on. Whereas for a person with pessimism, challenging life events are something to be avoided at all costs. Yeah. And people feel differently, but they also respond very differently as well to challenges.
Yeah, no, I know the misconception I had with mindfulness is that we have to block out the negative thoughts, because I've always wanted to be as optimistic and positive as I can. But then I thought, okay, if I block out all the negative thoughts while thinking, meditating, that will work. But it just breeds more negative thoughts. You have to accept it and let it pass rather than try and block it out. It's just what I thought I was doing at the start, which is right. But it's obviously very tough.
Yeah, because you're sitting down, you're practicing some meditation and you're trying to block out those thoughts and they come to your mind anyway. And then you've got this stream of thought coming in. Why can't I block out all these negative thoughts? What's wrong with me? Oh, gee, I'd like to be good at this mindfulness stuff, but I'm no good at it. Maybe some people aren't cut out for it. Maybe some people are. I wish I could, because it sounds like it'd be a neat thing to do.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden we're lost in a world of rumination about mindfulness.
And you let it pass out. I think the expectations coming into it, I think people, I've read in the book that they have a misconception of this will solve my problems, this will make all my negative thoughts go away. But I think we need to learn, which I need to learn as well, that mindfulness is just learning to pay attention. And that's really helped. I've noticed that since we've started talking, like the last month, I've been using the Smiling Mind app just to start off. And then, but it was funny when you've said before that you can be good to sit down and be mindful for 10 minutes. But then if you're mindful, if you're unmindful for the next 24 hours of the day, then it's really pointless. You've got to learn to be mindful informally and formally. And did you want to just explain to people what the difference with formal mindfulness and informal mindfulness is?
Yeah. Well, the formal practice of mindfulness is what most people think of when they think of mindfulness, and that's meditation. So you're sitting in a chair doing nothing other than paying attention in a mindful way for a few minutes. The informal practice of mindfulness means to be mindful while we're doing something, right? So it could be when you're driving your car, to pay attention to the road. We've published 4 papers with the Monash University Accident Research Centre. So the more mindful the driver, the less accidents, infringements, road rage, aberrant driving, etc. So to be mindful, to pay attention while we're doing something, to listen while somebody's speaking to us, to taste our food while we're eating, to just feel the breeze in our face while we're walking. And you see, when we've got a lot on our plate, and many people do, you've got challenging things in life to deal with, and they need attention. Mindfulness is not a distraction from the challenges in life. In fact, quite the opposite. It's helping us to engage more fully with the things that present themselves to us in our life. But, we have a number of complex things we've got to deal with, decisions to make, etc. And you engage your attention with those complex things in a mindful way. But the thing is, all of a sudden you've got some downtime. You've got a 5-minute walk from your car to the next meeting you've got, or something else. The next meeting, I mean, when your COVID world changes and opens up again.
Yeah.
So you've got a 5-minute walk. For most people, we're not mindful. That's a 5-minute opportunity for worry.
Yeah.
And so from a mindfulness perspective, we just give ourselves some mental space, a little bit of clear air. That is, while you're walking, just walk. Just feel the rhythm of the body, the breeze in your face, the sound of the birds that are singing, for example. And what we do is we cultivate a calmer, clearer, more attentive state of mind if we just walk mindfully. And then we step into the next complex thing, but we step into it with a different state of mind. Whereas if we fill that 5-minute walk with another 5 minutes of rumination and worry, when we get into the shower in the morning, I can remember one person, I was running a program for, university staff, and, one of the ladies doing the program, she said, I've realised how unmindful I am all the time.
Yeah.
She said, I fill every spare moment with worry about stuff, and I'm stressed and so much to do. And she said, one of the ways I've noticed that is I get out of the shower in the morning. And most mornings when I get out of the shower, I can't remember whether or not I used a shampoo because I'm just on automatic pilot doing my hair. And she said, now I have mindful showers. So as when I'm in the shower, I just feel the water, just feel the temperature, and just the simple pleasure of just having a shower, but in a mindful way. But she said what happens is rather than getting out of the shower and feeling all stressed and under the pump, she said, I get out of the shower and I feel more relaxed. And I've just enjoyed a simple pleasure in my day. She also said it saves me another 5 minutes every day because I don't have to get back in the shower and wash my hair again because I remember, she said, my shampoo bills have halved.
It sounds familiar with, like, if your parents saying, where are my keys? I've left my keys here in my wallet. Or you're just like, if you're paying attention at the start and then you won't forget. And I see that in the book, a lot of people forget things or where things are and they'll think, I'm going mad or my memory's no good. But it's literally just being unmindful and not remembering and concentrating on what you're doing every day. It's quite funny.
Yeah, but, just 1 second of paying attention when you put down the car keys can save you 15 minutes of trying to find them, when you've forgotten where they are. Because you see, the attention circuits in the brain are the prerequisite for all of the other executive functioning circuits. So working memory, your ability to remember stuff and process information and so on. It all hinges on the attention bit. If we don't pay attention, the memory circuits are offline. Our decision-making will be much poorer if we're not paying attention. Our ability to manage our emotions. So the thing is that the number one executive or higher function that we have is a fancy name for it's attention regulation. That's another way of saying being mindful, our ability to focus, to be on task. And even in mundane things, it helps us not to lose stuff. That's pretty useful, saves a lot of time in itself.
Yeah, no, it's good. There was one quote that I remember that really stuck with me from the book was, and I had to write it down, was the ability to think about what is not happening is a cognitive achievement that comes at an emotional cost. And it just stuck with me because I was like, everything that happens, like COVID-19 or like something that's happened, grieving, someone's passed away, that you're still in control of how you can react to it, regardless of what it is. And just the people are being, like, if you're unmindful and yes, you can create up all these fantasies, but then if you're not in the present moment, you actually become like, I can see one in the book you're talking about depression, anxiety, stress, it leads to addiction, and how a remedy for this is, which you study extensively, is just being mindful and present in the moment. And yeah.
It's like one generic skill that we call mindfulness, but it has an infinite number of applications. And it's not like the only thing that we need in the world, but it helps to make a whole lot of other things easier if we get that bit right in the first place. And certainly from a mental health perspective, it helps enormously, but a whole lot of other things too. But it's like the first thing that makes it easier for all the other things that we need to do.
Do you remember times where, say, with your wife or certain situations where you just thought, like, thank God I've practiced this as a habit, that I was being mindful, because otherwise this could have gone just pear-shaped? Like, have you noticed the benefits from when you started, which I'll talk about how you do your daily routine and how you meditate, but from then when you started to notice the benefits in certain situations where you're like, wow, I was really reacted differently then?
Yeah, I think from those teenage years, had a lot of worry about study and exams and everything else. So I kind of intuitively started to train myself in what I would now call mindfulness. Stop worrying about the exams at the end of the year. They're not going to come till the end of the year. Just pay attention to what you can do, and that's to get your attention on the study you're doing now. So I used to do that so I'd feel calmer, but I would also study better. And I used to cultivate it when I went into the exam room. So in pressure situations, exams, sport as well, cultivate that, but I'd feel a lot calmer stepping into those situations. So I actually used to feel really very calm. Everybody talks about how stressful exams are and everything else. Well, I found, well, why do they have to be stressful? It's just the stress is the kind of the self-imposed bit, and the worry about the outcome in the future rather than just paying attention to the process as it unfolds in the moment. One produces stress, the other one produces competence and effectiveness. So it was like being able to manage those situations a lot better. And so it meant through education, doing medicine, and stepping into as a doctor, some pretty complex situations you didn't always feel totally trained to do, because you have your training, but that doesn't prepare you for everything you're going to confront when you step into the emergency room and everything else. So, but the ability to be mindful, to be present, to step the way through a complex situation moment by moment was an absolute lifesaver. Hopefully for the patient, but certainly for myself.
Yeah. I was going to say, when you did the medicine, I think it was, I forget what hospital it was now, but were you in the emergency sometimes and were trying to help people what was your role in the hospitals?
Well, I mean, I went through the medical course, and then in your residency years, you get rotated around emergency, surgery, medicine. And then I went into the general practice stream, so you get general practice training, and you do geriatrics and all sorts of rotations. So you have a very broad base of experience by the time you come through all of that. But I certainly do remember, particular situations where being very mindful. I can remember the first respiratory arrest I had to deal with. Okay. And I was, because other people were, off sick, I was asked to do an overnight shift in a large regional hospital in Victoria. And so I was the only person as an intern, doing your first emergency shifts ever.
Yeah.
And you're in there by yourself. And so it must have been, I don't know, maybe, after midnight. And there's this call that comes in, ambulance, we're on the way, we're going to be there in about 5 minutes. A guy, we don't know anything about him, probably in his early 30s, respiratory arrest, he's not breathing, we're bagging him at the moment, but we'll be there in a few minutes. Okay. And I can remember it was one of the most mindful experiences in my life, because it was like, okay, now the thing about being mindfulness is being open to the present moment. Now, because if my mind goes, no, I don't want to be here now. I wish I wasn't here. Beam me up, Scotty. It's like, that's an exercise in futility, and you create stress, but your mind's also not engaging with the thing. So I can remember just kind of taking a deep breath and like, okay, well, this is going to be interesting, right? So right, now I've got a few minutes. So what are the most likely things that it could be? So my mind just kind of starts to work through a few things, male, living alone, early 30s, could be a drug overdose. Yeah. It could be asthma. They didn't know he had asthma. It could be a foreign body. It could be this. And I can remember just saying, okay, well, could you, to the nurse assisting me, could you please get this ready? And we'll need that ready, and this and that. And so when it arrived, and anyway, just working the way through it.
Yeah.
And when he came in, from what little bit of information I had, all right, well, look, I think my best guess at the moment, it might be drug overdose. And so, gave him something, and he woke up on the needle and, for the antidote to the narcotic that he may well have taken.
Yeah.
And so, great, worked through that situation. But the mind worked very clearly and very well and very calmly. But the funny thing is with being, most mindful moments is that there's not the worry about the outcome so much as the attention on the process. And it's the same thing that athletes have noticed for a long time. When they're performing at their peak in what looks to be a pressure situation, the paradox is inwardly calm but so fully in the moment, there's no room for anxiety about the outcome. The outcome, in a sense, looks after itself. But some people confuse mindfulness with a kind of distraction. I can remember one time a person saying, oh, mindfulness, isn't that a way of distracting yourself from your worries? And it's actually the opposite of that. the worries are the distraction from the present moment.
Yeah.
So mindfulness is a remedy for distraction, not a distraction.
Yeah, I feel like if you stay away from, I think some people have thought that mindfulness will help me get away from my thoughts that are going on outside or something externally, but it actually brings it to the forefront and you learn how to cope with it. And yeah, the book mentions in this peak performance section which is what I experienced today and what I've learned while reading it, was when you've got an outcome, because this can be relevant to business, to anything, that if you need something, you got an important business deal you need to do and you're stressed about it, you're like, it's a week away, I need to prepare. And you come back to realise, I'm like, oh, this is what I need to do, like you did at the hospital. Don't worry about it, it's a week away. Don't stress about it now because I won't be able to concentrate. And I wish I had this for exams when I studied at RMIT, and I wish I would have done my course at Monash, because I'm sure you've produced a very online courses and how to deal with it, because it was the most stressful time, exams, because you're trying to study, going nuts. You know it's tomorrow morning and you're up at 12:30 in the morning, and you're like, and you know you're not concentrating because you're worried about the future moment, when you should just be relaxed and attentive and actually study what you need to study. So it's incredible how mindfulness is, even from the brief that I've been adopting at work, that when I've got something to do, I just focus on it straight away. And instead of thinking about something further, like you're just a lot more productive and you really notice the difference. And it's pretty much it's gym for the mind, and it's incredible.
Yeah, we feel better, but we also function better at the same time. It's very easy when the mind, there's a term given to this sort of distracted mode of mind we go into when we're not mindful. It's called default mode.
Yes.
But we give it different names like worry, rumination, catastrophizing, etc. But it's a distracted mode of mind we go into. And so our attention's not going to what's in front of us. And so mindfulness switches off all of that default thinking. But we often, I think, make a kind of a mistake. And, it's an understandable mistake. But a lot of the time when we're getting worried or nervous or anxious about future things, and, we think, I've got a plan, I've got to prepare. And the mind's just going over and over and over stuff. What about this? And I hope this goes all right. What about that? And often worry masquerades as something useful. Like it pretends to be planning and preparation when it's actually just worry.
Yeah.
Now, to be mindful means if you need to plan and prepare, then you sit down and you plan and prepare.
Correct.
You do what you need to do. So I was just, presenting, before our podcast, had a presentation to, large group, online via Zoom, and needed to get in there and just check the, process, because it was a complex process, for logging on, etc. The presentation ready. What didn't need is, I hope it goes all right, or what if this happens, or what if that happens, etc. That's not planning and preparation, that's worry. So to be mindful means to get your attention on what you need to do. And when you've done that, then mentally put it down. So if you're stepping out, then having a cup of tea, then just have a cup of tea. So there's a kind of a mental rest. But, worry and rumination, it often masquerades as something useful, and it gets a lot of attention, therefore. But it's not. It's just a distraction.
It's interesting how you said we're in our habitual mode, and our brain, and we're wired to be habitual, and actually becoming aware and being mindfulness breaks that habit and starts. So I think your brain wants to do all your habitual things and run autonomously. And whereas if you start being mindful and you start you can rewire your brain to be attentive and choose what you want to do each time, which is incredible. And there was one thing I was reading on that I feel like would be beneficial for you to explain further, is the allostatic load of when we overstress, and what the actual risk and what's happening when we do that. Because people are stressing now, like with all situations, and they don't understand what's actually happening physiologically to it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you see, we have what's called a fight or flight response, otherwise known as the stress response. But fight or flight is a little bit more descriptive. So if, for example, you're walking through the jungle and out comes a tiger, and we'll use tiger because, Richmond supporters around here.
Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun. Yeah.
So out comes a tiger. You have a fight or flight response. Am I going to fight the tiger, or am I going to fly? That is, try and get out of danger. Either way, it's a turbocharge of energy. So everything that's happening with your heart, your metabolism, your breathing, the whole engine, there's a little turbocharge button that goes off in your brain. It's called the amygdala, but your brain, your body goes into a completely different gear. Now, the point is that stress, this response is actually meant to be good for our health, not bad for our health, right? Provided we're eyeball to eyeball with a tiger.
I was going to say.
Now, the unfortunate thing is the vast majority of times we activate this response, it's got nothing to do with the present moment. So there we are. I don't know, maybe some of your listeners have been awake at 3 a.m. before. It's like, There we are, awake at 3 a.m. and, catastrophizing under the pump, feeling stressed. And just consider what life is throwing at you at 3 a.m. Chances are it's a soft mattress, a soft pillow, a warm doona and a quiet room. Can life possibly get any more comfortable than that?
Yeah.
So present moment reality is as comfortable as life can get, and yet in our mind we could be totally in a world of pain. We've had 100 arguments with people that aren't even there. We've relived things from the past that have already come and gone. We've had 1,000 catastrophes in our head. And there, if we take all of that mental projection about the future and the past to be real, the body faithfully translates it into the fight or flight response. But in that situation, all these chemicals are pumping around. They've got nowhere to go and they've got nothing useful to do. Now, that is not a turbocharge of energy. We've got other names for it like anxiety, an inappropriate activation of a fantastic system. So when people say stress is bad for our health, that's the kind of thing we're talking about. Now, when we do that a lot, and at the moment there are a lot of people doing it a lot, and these are challenging moments in collectively for us to be mindful. And so for many people in difficult situation, lost job, what about the future? And the mind's playing a lot of catastrophes and scenarios, etc. The fight or flight's activating. But that produces this wear and tear on our system that's called allostatic load. It's like getting a car, but we're constantly revving the engine and hammering it. And we wonder, well, why is the car running out of fuel? Why are the parts wearing out faster? Why, well, it's the way that it's being driven. Same with our body. So when we learn to be mindful, come back to the present moment, well, who knows what's going to happen in a month, 6 months or whatever, but at this moment, just make me a cup of tea. Just come back to that.
Yeah.
At this moment, the head's on a pillow, just come back to that. At this moment, working out my finances and making a decision about that, just give attention to that. So when we bring our attention back to moment by moment, job by job, one thing at a time, then it switches off a lot of that allostatic load. But there's a whole lot of things that happen when we activate that stress system way in excess of what's required. And, so it puts a wear and tear on our cardiovascular system.
Yeah.
And also from a COVID perspective, it actually impairs our immunity.
Mm-hmm.
So we're more likely to get sick if we're exposed to a virus. If we get sick, get a clinical infection, it's going to be a whole lot more severe and we're going to take longer to recover. Now, the good news is that if we learn how to be more mindful and switch that wear and tear off the system, then the immune system works better. So we get exposed, we're less likely to get sick. If we get sick, it'll be far less severe and the recovery will be quicker. But also the effects on the brain. So all that stress ages the brain fast. We know that mindfulness slows down the aging of the brain, slows down the aging of our cells. So there's a whole lot of really interesting things that happen when we take this wear and tear off the system. And one of the things is like a car that's revving too fast the whole time, is that when we learn to drive with more awareness, more mindfully, we conserve a lot of fuel. So many people are mindful, notice that they burn less energy, sleep better, able to, sort of function in a more sustainable kind of way. And they're really useful insights.
Yeah, as I was reading through the book and it was telling that mindfulness can help with cancer, motor neuron disease, and like all these anxiety, depression, addiction. And it was when you say the side effects of being unmindful, people are always going to stress that it's a common nature. But then you think, oh no, all this is happening now. But the positive side of it is being mindful to reverse all this. And you're not having to, I know you've said before that if you could patent mindfulness, it'd be $1 billion industry. Because it's something that it's like the gym, it's good for you and if you practice it, you're going to get bigger, you're going to feel healthier. And it's like mindfulness. You can, by practicing it, you're really helping your mind. And you've said before also that it's amazing when you think about it. If you're sitting down in a chair being mindful, you actually rewire your brain to be better. You're becoming, your DNA is changing for the better. And it's just incredible that this is a concept that is beneficial for all of us.
Well, if the benefits of mindfulness could be put into a patentable pill, that would be an absolute blockbuster drug.
Yeah.
And but mindfulness is free, something we can do every day for ourselves. And you mentioned before about, I'm not sure if there are studies on motor neuron disease, but certainly things like MS, for example, patients coping with cancer, and all of these things. It doesn't mean that those conditions go away. No. It can be helpful in the outcomes of those conditions. A person might, of course, need to have all the other medical treatments and so on that they might need. But what it certainly can do is help a person to cope with all of those things far, far better. So it doesn't mean all of our problems go away because we practice mindfulness, but it does, from a physical point of view, it helps the body to do better what it's trying to do, which is to repair and heal itself. So it makes it easier for the body to do that. It shifts things, if you like, a little bit of the balance, a little bit more towards the body's own defenses and a little bit away from the disease. But it doesn't mean all those diseases will just go away because we practice mindfulness. But it certainly can help us to cope better.
You did say, I saw that in the book, you can't help the cards that have been dealt with you. That's just how genetics is. But you can sort of definitely be in control of how you use it, how you look after yourself and how susceptible, because I hear stories that, he was fit, he was healthy, and then he got cancer or something like that, and you don't know, people like, I don't know how he did it, he eats healthy, and you just don't know mindfully what's happening in person's life. And if you be more mindful that you can help yourself and be the best version of yourself that you can, and that's really, this is what you're in control of, is the actions you take. And mindfulness to me will be definitely an integral part of my life for sure.
Yeah, certainly our understanding of genetics has changed in the last decade or two. Because we used to be taught, well, if you got certain things that you inherit genetically, then those genes will just play out. But we now, with the field of science called epigenetics, we now know that there are a whole lot of things in our life that, for better or for worse, are switching on genes and switching off genes. So you can have things that are in your genetic makeup, but they may never play out. And so we now know that, and it's not just about mindfulness, it's also about exercise and diet and sleeping well and good relationships and social support and chemical exposures. So all of these things are changing the way our DNA expresses itself. Yeah. So when we're not doing things, smoking, not look after ourselves, etc., can switch on genes associated with various illnesses.
Yes.
And we know when we make other changes that are more healthy, it switches off a lot of those genes, or at least turns them right down. And so that has a lot of implications for chronic illness and for aging. And so it's not just about mindfulness, but if mindfulness can help us to make all those other healthy changes we need to make in our life, then it's been a real win-win situation.
Yeah, so it's sort of the pillars that I want to focus on in our podcast and going forward is the health, wealth, love, happiness. And mindfulness really helps with all of the aspects. I feel like it's an integral part to start. If you're healthy and you're attentive, it can just flow on to business, your lifestyle, relationships. Like I'm sure you being mindful growing up and having that has made you a better person to be around, easier for relationships, and it's just helped. It's just positive, and it's sort of doing it not for just yourself, but people around you as well, being more mindful. And yeah, it's just incredible. And I'm sort of wanting people to come out from this as wanting it to give it a try and how to do it. And I wanted to sort of talk about, like, what's your routine, or like, do you have a mindfulness you do with your wife or family, or how do you go about it?
Well, I have half an hour of meditation in the morning and the early evening every day. So half an hour meditation every day. Not many people want to practice that much meditation, so people can certainly get a lot of benefit if they practice regularly, but even smaller amounts of meditation. But for myself, it's half an hour twice a day. Then during the day, I have a lot of little, I suppose you could say, mini meditations.
Correct.
Not a full stop punctuating my day, but lots of little commas.
Yes.
And that's a little space between finishing one thing, that might be, say, a podcast, and just giving myself a little bit of mental space, like a little half minute here or a minute there, before I move on to the next thing. So those little moments of meditation, as well as morning and evening. And then during the day, and especially when there's a lot on, I try to practice being mindful as I go about my work. And so, last night, going off to give a lecture in an empty lecture theatre, but mind you, being live streamed and so on, walking through the rain and everything else. And, your mind could think of 1,000 things, but for now, just walking, holding the umbrella, so for myself, just being mindful in my day-to-day life, just even in the simple moments, helps me to conserve energy, mental, physical energy, emotional energy, and then that's energy to use in the things that I really want to be productive and creative with in my life. So I do try to practice that in as much as I can, and look, like pretty much everybody else on the planet, we're a work in progress.
Yeah.
But I would encourage your listeners to be patient and gentle with themselves. So if they do want to learn about mindfulness, then be patient. It takes time, like any other skill. Like imagine if we're 11 months old and we're trying to take our first steps and we fall over on our backside. I mean, an 11-month-old child doesn't say, "Hey, Mum, I can't walk. I tried it didn't work for me." Mm-hmm. I mean, an 11-month-old child just gets straight back up on its feet and tries again and falls over and tries again. And you see, the child learns quickly, whereas for ourselves, we tend to get critical with ourselves. And so I'd encourage your listeners, if they want to learn about mindfulness, is to be patient with the process. It takes a little time. And there's certainly some courses they could do if they're interested, like the Future Learn course on mindfulness. It's free. It's 4 weeks. It's a Monash University course, but it's on the Future Learn platform. And so your listeners could register for that if they'd like to. It's called Mindfulness for Wellbeing and Peak Performance.
Yeah, I'll add that to the link below. But yeah.
Yeah, so that's certainly something, that kind of thing I invest a lot of my time and my work in, because the thing I've come to value most in my life, I'm very keen that it's shared with other people that might have an interest in it as well.
Yeah, okay.
Because, you kind of, I've always felt for this, firstly for my own stress and angst and everything else when I was young and growing up, but that led me to kind of feel for the well-being of others and want to try and dedicate my work to helping other people who experience the same kinds of stresses and so on that I experienced and tried to learn to work with. So that's what I kind of dedicate my working life to.
Yeah, and it's just from what you've done in your history, like 13 books, you would have had to be pretty mindful and attentive to get all those books out. So I'm just looking at one book and like, geez, that's a feat in itself. You've got 13, which is incredible. And just to show people again, I like to get started. Like I've started personally, you were the ambassador of Smiling Mind app. And I feel like, as you've mentioned before, it's like the training wheels to be mindful, to meditate and to have a guided meditation. And that's been really good for me for the last month. And then transitioning now to try and do it. It's going to be harder again with no guided meditation, but I feel like it will practice even more. And yeah, I would recommend people reading the Mindfulness for Life book. I'll give you the link. I got it. The shipping might take a little while at the moment. It's been a bit delayed with what's going on, but I really recommend the break. Yeah, it was hard to find, and then when it was coming, I said express shipping a couple of days, and it took them nearly 10 days. But that book really was a good breakdown of what mindfulness is, the benefits. So I feel people know when you tell them about mindfulness meditation, they know it's good. Like, it's something you should be doing, but practicing it and doing it is another thing. That's anything that's good for us. It's simple, but it's not easy. People just choose to do the easy thing. But once I've read it and I actually dissected how beneficial this would be to be an integral part of my life, and that's when I changed my mindset of this is something I need to religiously implement in my life from day to day.
Yeah. And if I could just give another couple of shout outs, I mentioned before our course and so on, and you mentioned the Smiling Mind app, and that and Headspace. There's another great mindfulness app as well. And there are many around these days, but also there's Mindful in May. And so that's a lady in Melbourne. She's psychiatry trained, but very deeply committed to mindfulness in her life and for mental health. And she has this initiative called Mindful in May. And so if people want to get involved with that, it's like a whole month of daily practices, supporting part of a community, spending that month to learn to be more mindful. And again, it's a philanthropic thing as well, raising money, especially to help people in developing countries to have access to clean water and so on. So at the same time as learning mindfulness and in a supportive community, also helping to contribute to the well-being of others. So that's just another little bit of a shout out there if your listeners are interested.
No, good. I'll get the information. I listened to that podcast of you and her. That was informative as well when she had it up. So that was really good.
At least value, yes.
Yeah, it was good. It was good value for me. There was one thing you said when you go, I don't know if you're doing this still, your morning jog in the morning, that you don't listen to headphones or you just, and I see the concept of it, you don't. And for me, when I drive to work or I like to learn, so I want to have a podcast in my headphones, but now I'm realising it's something that I really want to do because it's beneficial, that I know you're not being fully attentive to driving or running. And I just wanted to get your concept on that because people will be like, oh, I want to do this and this at the same time. I know my mum says I can do 4 or 5 things at once. What are you doing, Brandon? But then I was like, how... I just wondered, are you still being attentive and beneficial of me, like going on a jog and listening to a podcast?
Yeah. Well, you're not going to give the podcast very good quality attention if you're doing something else at the same time. I mean, you'll take in some bits and pieces and so on, but nowhere near as much as if you just really listen to the podcast.
Yeah.
And just doing that, you'll take in more. It'll be a deeper experience for you. Same thing with driving. You're only going to get little chunks here and there and not realize how much you're actually missing if you're trying to drive at the same time. Because if you are really, really listening to the podcast while you're driving, it means your attention's not on the road.
On the road, yeah.
You not even get where you want to go. So the complex multitasking is a modern furphy. It doesn't happen. The human brain does not pay attention to 2 complex things at the same time. If one thing is just really, really simple that we can do on automatic pilot, then we can kind of do it and give a reasonable amount of attention to something else at the same time. But so for myself, when I'm going for a morning run, I like to hear the sound of the birds. I like to hear the sound of a possum going through a tree. I like to, just notice spiders where it's picked up the dew, on a tree as I'm going past. For me, it's a rich sensory experience. This morning, there'd been a lot of rain overnight. I love to hear the sound of the waterways, the roar of the waterways as they're cascading over the rocks and so on. So, but for me, that gives me a mental rest. The other thing I like to do, part of that listening and being aware is I do like to notice cars when I'm crossing main roads. And if I've got plugs in my ears, I don't want to miss the sound of the car while I'm crossing a road. So it's also a practical thing too. But we can kind of give ourselves a little bit too much sensory overload sometimes. We often do, in training people in mindfulness, we do kind of multitasking experiments. So you get somebody to try and listen to somebody else speaking about something, but at the same time to be answering emails or doing something else. When people do that, they actually notice that they're missing big chunks. They didn't even realize they were missing. And then you get them to do the same thing, but to give full and undivided attention. And when a person gives it more attention, then they reduce the mental load, but they take in so much more, a lot of nuances that they might have missed. So we've got to see it for ourselves. We can't take it from somebody else. Oh, this is how it is. We've got to do the experiment ourselves.
It's the classic when you first meet someone and you shake the hands, nice to meet you, my name is Brandon, my name is Craig, but you're already thinking about who is this person, and then you're talking for a minute or so and you're like, geez, I've forgotten their name, because you weren't present in that moment because you were thinking about being ahead, what am I going to say or what am I going to do, and you just forget. And I've noticed how much more attentive I am with single tasks, and what irritates me is having distractions. So like, I know you don't have a phone at all, and I don't think, have you ever had a mobile phone?
No, I never had one.
So what
how simple it makes life.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, how does your wife contact you or anything like that? Anything urgent? Just have you got your emails on standby?
Oh, look, regardless of what people sort of think, what about something urgent? I don't know. Maybe something actually urgent happens once every few years. I don't know. I can't remember the last time something really urgent happened.
Yeah.
Somebody leaves a message, you get to it when you can. I don't know. Or somebody knows where you're, landline. But when I'm driving, for example, it means I'm not trying to drive and do a whole lot of other stuff at the same time. If you're talking on your mobile phone while you're driving, research from Monash says you're about four times more likely to have a motor vehicle accident. It's like when I'm driving, I'd just rather drive. And when I got downtime, I don't want a phone by the bed, with the little screen glowing all the time and pinging away and telling me there's somebody other message and looking into the screen and upsetting my sleep. So it makes it easier for me to have mental downtime. Now, this is no big thing against mobile phones, because mobile phones, I'm sure, can be very helpful, and people who use them and can use them well. But I've just never, in a sense, developed my life around depending on a mobile phone. So I just find it extremely easy to cope without one because I've never developed a system or a dependency on them.
Yeah, and I've seen you said kids nowadays, 40% of them have some form of addiction or attention deficit disorder where they can't concentrate because they're giving an iPad at an early age, and the effects that is having. I know I've grown up with a mobile phone, and now I've got no notifications turned on except phone calls. So I've got Facebook, Instagram, all the social medias, but having them all turned off that I don't get a trigger when something happens, and it's really changed how attentive I am. But it's just, how do you feel? How do you see our current generation compared to how you grew up, and are you noticing kids are becoming more inattentive? How do parents, because I know now everyone's getting homeschooled to uni school, so they've got 3 or 4 kids running around everywhere. Like a big madhouse. I know a family friend, she's got 3 kids, she's got school, and she goes, it's crazy. I was like, how do they try and instill becoming more mindful, and how do they deal with it?
Yeah. Well, look, see, technology, if it's used well, can be a very good servant. But if it's not used well, or if it's overused, it starts to become a tyrannical master. So at least a third, maybe 40% of kids these days have an addiction to their device, to the technology. The average young adult checks their phone about every 8.6 minutes throughout the day, right? Hundreds of times a day. If that phone is sitting on the desk, for example, even if it's often face down, studies on university students show if that phone is just on the desk, then the drop in performance in every way they could measure it was significant, because the mind keeps going to the phone addictively. The little addiction center in the brain's firing off. There was an interesting paper published in a journal, and they're looking at the changes of the human brain associated with modern technology. And they focused on 3 areas. The attentional circuits in the brain are being trashed, so people's attention spans are dropping. Microsoft, I think, estimated that humans have got shorter attention spans than goldfish these days anyway. But so the attention circuits in the brain. The second thing is memory circuits are not being used the way that they would have always been used previously, because you don't need to remember it. I think you just got to store it on your phone or know where to find it. So we're not using a memory like a muscle that's not being used. It wastes away. So memory circuits are shrinking, and areas of the brain associated with social and emotional intelligence are being negatively impacted by the overuse or misuse of social networks. So people are losing the ability to actually interact with people face to face. And mind you, the COVID world is certainly not helping at the moment. So the technology is not always being used well or wisely, and it can certainly have a negative impact. It can be used wisely,
Yes.
And people can be the masters of their technology, but it takes a lot of consideration and discipline to do that these days. And even people like, Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and so on, they never gave their kids phones until they were in their mid-teens.
Yeah.
The kids, I want an iPad, I wanted this, I wanted that. It's like, and they kind of really help the kids when they're growing up to, connect and not to be dependent on the technology.
Yes.
So this is not an easy task these days, especially not for parents, for kids who are distracted the whole time by their technology, and especially if it's in the bedroom at night and kids are on the screens at night. It'll upset their sleep. It'll have negative impacts on their mental health, and really got to set some kind of reasonable limits around it.
Yeah, you can tell even before sleep it's terrible with your melatonin levels, and I know personally it's not a good idea having your phone on just before bedtime. But in one tip to introduce mindfulness and meditation to your family or to your individual self, like if you were starting again, you were obviously you were probably ahead of your times in terms of we're surrounded by mindfulness and meditation, but you started out very young and you weren't aware of it. Like what would you do? Would you start with just a simple 10 minutes a day, get it going with a guided, like as you say, the training wheels of a Smiling Mind app?
Yeah, I'd say punctuate your day with 2 full stops. So it could be, say, 5 minutes in the morning before breakfast, before you get into your day. So 5 minutes in the morning, and then 5 minutes in the early evening between whatever you've been doing in the day and whatever you're going to do that night, and preferably before food. Main reason before food is after food, more likely to go to sleep, which is not mindfulness practice, right? So generally, as a rule of thumb, before food rather than after food. But during the day, punctuate your day with lots of little comments. 15 seconds here, half a minute there, a minute there, of just putting some space between completing one thing and commencing the next thing. Now, if a person does that, then they'll start to notice that more mindful while they're doing stuff, more engaged, more present while going about their day-to-day life, listening better to the person speaking to them, paying more attention when on the road, more aware of reactions in emotional situations, more able to stand back from them, not so much trying to control the negative emotion, but learning not to be controlled by the negative emotion. So all of these things start to come into play if a person practices mindfulness on a regular basis. But that would be a good starting dose.
Yes.
And then if a person tolerates that dose, then you can step it up a little bit and spend a bit more time. People think, I don't have time to do this, but it saves so much time.
Yeah, correct.
Distraction and inattention and so on, that costs a lot of time, a lot of energy as well. So it'll actually conserve energy and conserve time, even though it seems like we're taking time out of our day.
Yeah, I know you've published 12, 13 books, but the one that I read, Mindfulness for Life, I highly recommend it. I'll post where you can get it, be on Dimox everywhere, but that was a real eye-opener for me, the benefits and how it's going to change for the better and how it's just great for us. One thing before we wrap up, I am conscious of your time. I wanted to talk about, because there's going to be some people, everyone's going to have a comment and try and debunk mindfulness, and they'll be like, oh, well, if I'm watching TV, I'm being mindful, or if there was in the book which was good for me because I love goal setting, a bit of mental imagery, affirmations, and it said that actually that was helpful, was actually being mindfulness. And I want to just explain that to get people, instead of thinking that television's good for them or we better not plan ahead or goal setting, just how that is actually beneficial as well.
Yeah. Well, look, if we can be mindful and plan and prepare at the same time. It's just what you're doing now is planning and preparing, which is different to worrying, in which case you'll feel calmer, but you'll also process things a whole lot better. So being mindful doesn't mean not planning and preparing for the future. It's just not worrying about the future so much as we would normally do. So it's quite a different thing to what many people consider that mindfulness is about. But yeah, just to go back to the other part of your question that you're wanting to ask as well.
Yeah. So in terms of people, well, there's two parts, sort of the television and thinking if we're concentrating on one thing and how that's distracting, and then sort of how people can deal with the stress and anxiety of our current situation and going forward.
Yeah. Well, you see, we can be doing something like watching television and do it mindfully. although most of the time we're probably not doing it mindfully. We're just kind of in a semi-vegetative state.
Yeah.
But you can do something like watch television and be mindful at the same time. But the thing is, when we're not mindful, it's so easy for the mind to wander into worry, rumination, past, future, etc. And that burns precious energy, precious time, and often it makes things look worse than they are. So mindfulness will kind of help us to stand back from the thinking, being able to sort of sift the wheat from the chaff, as it were. We do have occasional useful thoughts. Not very often, about every 10 years we have a useful thought. But in amongst it all, it's buried beneath a whole lot of other stuff going on that's either just a waste of time and some of it's just downright noxious.
Yeah.
So mindfulness can help us to make in a more discerning way a conscious choice about what to give attention to, what thoughts to follow through on, which ones to leave alone. Like if you're walking through a market, it just helps you to be more conscious about which stalls you go to and you buy stuff from, and which ones to just walk past because it's a waste of your money.
Yeah, sure.
It's a little bit like that in terms of what we buy into in our heads, because there are things that we need to do. There are things that need our attention and energy. And mindfulness, as we were saying before, is not a kind of a distraction or an avoidance, quite the opposite.
Yeah.
And so we do need to respond to this current situation, but we certainly don't need to collectively catastrophize about it. And one of the things I've noticed is the amount of fear around COVID-19 has been more infectious than the actual condition itself.
Yeah.
And people's idea of threat. Now, mind you, older person in particular, chronic illnesses, COVID can be a pretty serious condition. For the vast majority of people, it's a very low-level condition. You'd probably rather avoid it than have it. But the amount of fear proportional to the actual amount of danger is amplified out of all proportion for many people's minds. And so hopefully mindfulness helps people to get things back into proportion, get reliable information, take appropriate steps around, sanitation, all that kind of stuff, social distancing, fine, so do all of the sensible stuff that people want to do. But the amount of catastrophizing, the amount of anxiety, and then how that bubbles over into people panic buying and all sorts of other things, not particularly helpful.
Yeah, correct.
Hopefully mindfulness helps people to stay grounded, a little bit more rational, a little bit more discerning in our responses to dealing with this current situation and making the best of it. We can grow through adversity. We don't have to be, we don't have to choose the post-traumatic stress option. We can choose the post-traumatic growth option. Yeah. And I'd say choose the latter.
Yeah, there was an interesting book that I read. It was the thought of explaining post-traumatic growth. You got the opportunity, and this is with anything grief or external situations like COVID-19, and it brings it back to mindfulness that, well, it doesn't matter what's happening, we've still got a choice in how we react to it. So I think it was a nice way to finish that. While everything, the craziness is going on around us at the moment, and I feel like in Melbourne we're slowly getting to the close the curve and we're starting to get back, but people have just suffered immense stress. Like I saw last night, Beyond Blue have had 40 to 50% more calls about depression, stress, anxiety, and that's all happening. But I just feel like people can adopt and try mindfulness and meditation. It can definitely help with their lives. So thank you, Craig, for coming on. It was a great chat. And just for all the listeners, he's got a course that I have looked at. I did watch a video of the mindful eating, which I thought was quite funny, but it was very good. And the book Mindfulness for Life, which I can't recommend highly enough for people wanting to start with mindfulness and the journey of meditation. And just quickly before you go, what's ahead for you? What's your plans? Have you got any books coming out there, or you got something in the works? Or?
I got a couple of ideas for books that may well have a bit of space for some writing later on this year. Yeah. And, so there's lots of interesting things happening. We're developing a lot of online learning, with some colleagues. And so these things will be interesting projects. And I really love teaching mindfulness to people, preferably face-to-face when it's possible, but love teaching mindfulness to people and helping them to apply it in their day-to-day life. And so that area continues to expand, which has been tremendous. So, and who knows what the future holds. Whatever my idea about the future, I'm only going to discover what happens when it actually happens. So
yeah, you'll be present in the moment right now. So that's good. Thank you for your time, Craig, and I'll keep in touch and see what happens down the track.
Excellent. Thank you, Brandon.
Thank you.